So this is the time for you to ask questions and any information, anything you'd like to ask the panelists. And I'd like to start with a question, if I may. So my question is that in your experience, what have you found to be the greatest reason for a company to strive to retain the mature worker?
You want to start?
Yeah, Ryan, please.
I don't know if it's because I'm a lawyer or because I'm just how I am, but I don't want to be told that something is. I want to know why it is. Mm-hmm. And what I've found from interviewing the older workers is they have a perspective where they can tell you the origins of how things happened, and without that, I wouldn't know the why. So their experience and the knowledge of history for me is just really, really invaluable.
Terrific, thank you. So not to ignore the experience and knowledge that the mature worker brings to the company. Thank you, Brian. Yeah, Lynn.
And two things come to mind from my experience. The first is if you are in an industry where there are labor shortages, then obviously if it's hard to replace someone, it is imperative that you keep everyone you have. So that's an obvious one, and that would force organizations to pay attention to older workers because it's just so difficult to replace them. And the second observation cuts across any kind of industry or functional area, and that has to do with the struggles of being really successful and high-performing in today's economy. Because of that, because organizations are coming out of the recession and organizations are struggling to get beyond sustainability but into productivity, getting the most out of every employee or creating a cohesive workforce that generates as much in the way of results as you can possibly get is essential. So it becomes impractical and downright foolish to ignore such a significant percentage of the workforce, as Martin said.
Thank you, Lynn. So we're seeing that it's really important to understand what the mature worker brings to the table and not to ignore it. Would you like to chime in, Martin?
I don't actually, but...
Okay. He's our statistics man.
Let's hear some other questions.
Hey.
What about the young people who don't have jobs in their 20s? What happens to them long term? Do you have any statistics about that?
Well, young people right now who are struggling typically do get jobs, but they typically get them later, and they're paying less than jobs would have paid 10 years ago, basically. It's sort of... every morning when I would go to work, I would stop at basically a coffee shop in the village, and I would basically see a lot of very bright young people in their 20s who clearly have college degrees who are working part-time jobs that might pay $10 an hour. And there's turnover in these jobs. I mean, the food service industry has a lot of turnover, and some of them eventually move up, and some of them eventually move into other things. And the fact that unemployment rates have been high for young people is something that's was true before the recession started, but the recession has made it much worse. One of the industries that was hard hit during the recession was retail trade, and that often is a place where a lot of young people start, and that is coming back. And in a way, retail trade has been better in New York City than it has in large parts of the rest of the country, in part because of tourists from overseas. So young people will struggle, but most of them will eventually get out, and they're just going to make less money than they would have made 10 years ago, I think, is the bottom line there.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other questions from the audience? Yes, if you please would state your name and your organization.
Okay, I work in NYU. What are the notion?
Could you please state your name again, because I'm going to repeat it for the... Nepali Martinez from NYU. Thank you.
The notion that baby boomer salary is high, and with that same salary they could hire 2 or 3 younger employees.
In part...
I'm sorry. Can you repeat the question, please?
The notion that the salaries for baby boomers is high, enough that with the same salary they could hire 2 or 3 younger.
Thank you. The notion that the baby boomer salary is high and that the employer can hire 2 or 3 employees for that price.
That also depends on the industry you're in. I mean, if you're somebody like Google or somebody in the software industry, you're not going to be paying your senior people generally twice what you're paying your younger software engineers. So that really would vary by industry. I don't think NYU could lay off one professor and hire 2 younger ones. So they might be able to hire 20 adjuncts.
You know, I work for the city, so we don't make a lot of money. That's the first thing. So our older workers, although they get paid, the people who've been there longer get paid a little longer than the people, paid a little bit more than the people who haven't been there as long. My experience is that there's just no way we would be able to replace some of the older workers with younger workers. They just would not be able to do the things that the older workers are doing in our company.
Looks like I should be chiming in here, so I will for a minute. What we found is that the expectations of younger workers are very high. And there's a high degree of a feeling of entitlement also, and that applies to salary. So if you say an older worker is making $100,000 and therefore we could get 2 younger workers for $500,000, there's a good chance that younger person is not going to want $50,000. So the numbers don't play out quite that way.
Okay, thank you. I saw some other hands in the audience. Yes, sir. We're being represented by higher education today.
My question is for Ryan. How do you use all that information that you gather?
Okay, I'm going to repeat the question. Lou Galadine from Columbia University. And good question, how do you use all that information, Ryan, that you gather?
We haven't figured out all of the ways to use it yet, but one of the things that we do with the information is that we set up individual development plans for the high potential people, and we allow them to review the information that we've documented from the older workers to give them some perspective on the things that the person has gone through. It creates sort of a jump off point for them to have conversations with the people that they would potentially replace, and it just gives them some perspective on how things were when, way back when.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yeah, the gentleman way in the back. We don't have a microphone, so you have to speak up, and then I'll repeat your name and question. Mike Levy, Media Associates, and your question? Mike Weavy. Sorry, Mike.
My question is to Ryan. I like your comments, Ryan, thoughts about formal mentoring in organizations like yours and others between the younger workers coming new to the organization and the older experienced workers.
Some observations between the younger workers coming into the organization and between the younger and the older workers coming in. This question is for Ryan.
Was that, I'm no, sorry, can you just repeat that one more time?
The observations about the comparisons?
Mentoring. Do you
Mentoring. Mentoring. It's the, thank you, the formal mentoring of the younger workers and the older mature
It's
workers.
funny because I'm looking out in the audience there, and I see the Director of Learning and Organizational Development, and he probably could better answer that question than me. But again, as part of our individual development plans, one of the key things that we do is match up high potential younger workers with the older worker who is an incumbent who's at risk to retire or leave or whatever, and have them spend time together, because I think that the true way to effectively transfer knowledge is for them to sort of shadow that person and be mentored by that person. You could read about their history all you want, but if you're not working with that person on projects and shadowing them and watching how they make decisions and making mistakes, etc., you're really not going to learn.
Thank you. Thank you, Ryan. A wonderful technique to shadow the workers and to feel. Lynn, would you like to?
Yeah, I would like to chime in here because we've done a lot of work with mentoring programs, and I would say that mentoring can be very powerful, but it requires a great deal of orchestration up front. There has to be a willingness to share and a willingness to listen, and some of that has to do purely with the chemistry of the match, as well as with the knowledge to be passed along. So there are a lot of subtle aspects to setting up a mentoring program that's really going to work.
Okay, thank you, Lynn. Thank you, Ryan. Yes, sir. Carl Hyman, CH Consultancy. Okay, so the question is for Ryan again on mentoring. Do you see that there is a need for, or that there is any reverse mentoring going on, which would be the opposite of the younger worker mentoring the older worker?
Well, I do now. I actually am I'm going to look at my Director of Learning and Organizational Development and hope he's taking notes on that, because we haven't really sort of explored that direction. But it sounds like a great idea.
Yeah, great idea. Thank you. Yeah, and yes. Excuse me, I'm going to repeat your question. If you would tell me the question, I will tell the audience because I can't hear you.
So we have 77 million baby boomers marching to retirement. A recent survey said that baby boomers will not retire until age 80, which seems hard.
Wow.
So I asked the question, to retain the knowledge of baby boomers that have been in the workforce for a long time, companies, are any companies considering a program where baby boomers would work 3 days a week or 2 days a week, and that would free additional salary compensation to really bring some of the relatively young employees into the workforce for knowledge transfer? In other words, baby boomers who work 3 days a week, 4 days a week, versus 5 days a week, benefits week.
Okay, so it's basically, your question is there any plan for phased employment where boomers who are staying in the workforce longer will be able to work 3 days and not be coming into 5 days? And where is your association? I didn't hear where you're from. NASDAQ. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, any comments from our panel?
This is a simple one. The answer is yes. And there isn't a resource or a list of such companies, but yes, there are many companies that are looking at the kinds of jobs that can be job shared, or the kinds of jobs that can be scaled back if the performance expectations, and we cited several in the research report that I did that's referenced in my bio. So yes, companies are looking at just that.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you very much. I'm turning the podium back over to Kate. Thank you, panelists.
I was so absorbed in all of this, I forgot that I was supposed to come up, and David just said, come on up. But, you know, what a terrific panel today. What a terrific wealth of information, terrific audience. And so let's give a round of applause again for Renee and the panelists. Yay. Thank you so much. Don't forget to hand in your blue sheets and your white sheets when you're leaving. You're going to get a copy of Renee's book, Achieving the Good Life After 50. And we hope to see you next time for this really another very important seminar. Thank you again.